In today's episode of Art of Making, thread painting, an original technique of creating paintings out of a colored thread. How the dowry of Kyrgyz bride is prepared. Soraba, a bride headgear. Who is it intended for? For centuries, the Kyrgyz marrying off their daughter prepared a sep for her, which means a dowry. As a rule, these were the most necessary things for a young family to start an independent life. The dowry for our grandmothers was prepared from the cradle. Their mothers put the most beautiful and rare fabrics in the chest. Then, different types of toshoks were sewn from them. Toshok is a mattress, often made in a patchwork technique. It occupies a significant place in the life of the nomadic Kyrgyz people and is still used today. The craft artist Jibek will tell us about how toshok is made. I learned handicraft from my mother. She was a very talented craftswoman. What is surprising is that we are now sewing toshok measuring every centimeter with a ruler. Back then, our grandmothers sewed by eye, and they used to make it beautiful and smooth. I learned handiwork from my mother, and now I pass on this knowledge to my daughter. First of all, the craftswoman makes a sketch of the patterns and the toshok itself in order to visualize how the future product will look like. It's important to carefully consider the color combination. If the ancestors of the Kyrgyz used to choose bright colors, now people prefer pastel colors, says Perizat. Before we start sewing toshok, first we choose colors. We look at their combination. Only by choosing the color scheme correctly, we begin to sew. Our grandmothers used to make it as they wanted, using everything, but now we are thinking in advance how toshok will look like. We draw on paper, make sketches, choose patterns in advance. Meanwhile, we're developing new designs, representing new forms of toshok to people. Here, as you can see, we draw every toshok, think about what color the frame and the lines will be. We discuss it with the girls, and in this way, a new design of the mattress is born. Of course, the color scheme plays a large role. If the shades do not combine with each other, then our efforts were in vain. After we have decided on the design, we begin to make the front part of the toshok, consisting of kurak. Kurak is a name given to various types of products made from patches sewn together. The name comes from the word kura, meaning sewn together or assembled from individual pieces, and refers to both the finished product and the production method. To begin with, we cut long pieces 3 centimeters wide from the fabric, then glue them together. Today, one of the best fabrics for toshok is velvet. I use the so-called sheared velvet. There is cotton in its composition, and the fabric itself is quite dense. This is the main reason why we work with the velvet. Now we're going to cut out pieces of fabric. Then we collect them on one cotton fabric, that is, we sew these pieces of fabric to one cotton cloth. This is done to ensure that the kurak is durable. This is the method that our grandmothers and great-grandmothers used. The colors are the same as in the sketch. Before we cut, you need to check which side is working. For example, this side stretches, so we choose another one that does not stretch. And now we're going to make kurak from these pieces of fabric. The creation of a kurak also provides ample opportunities for the master's self-expression. Although most of the products have similar geometric shapes, proportions and symmetry, the use of different colors and intricate shapes, their connection is a real creative process. There are two main forms of patchwork. The first is made from square and triangular pieces, and the second from long strips of various colors. Firzato Chibekova demonstrates the latter. Now I want to show you a method called chi kurak. We start collecting fabrics from the middle. For the students, I mark the middle with a cross, but we are already used to it and can do it without it. We sew kurak from two colors and be sure to look where the front part of the fabric is. Otherwise, it's easy to confuse, and you get two different materials. The work is very painstaking, but interesting. When we make kurak, we always try to do it with love and think about the good. We wish the newlyweds to be happy, to use this toshok only for good occasions. Our grandmothers taught this, and now I also tell my girls to put their hearts into the product. Our kurak is ready. Everyone has its own size. We've now made a 15-size kurak. Now we need to collect all the kuraks in one large blanket. This will be the front of the toshok. For one toshok, you have to sew an average of 72 kuraks. This way we sew on the edges of the frame. Then we sew also with the help of a machine, milt, or in another way called ky. This is a piece of material that is sewn on for strength and beauty. The size of the toshok itself is 80 centimeters. Since the kuraks are 15 centimeters long and in general 60 centimeters, we make 13 centimeters at the edges of the frame. Everything is done according to the design. The front is ready. The craftswoman sews cotton fabric or satin cloth on the back of the toshok. But that's not all. We connected the kuraks, then sewn the frames, sewed the kyu, sewed cotton fabric or satin on the back of the toshok. Collar must be combined with the front. We'll leave one side open to fill the blanket. We fill the lower part of the blanket with wool, the upper part with synthepon, and then we sew it all up by hand. After the blanket is filled with insulation, an important stage is reached. You need to once again use a needle and a thick thread along the toshok. The more often the seams on the toshok, the more evenly the filler will be distributed. The very last stage, when we put the wool inside the pon, we sew it all by hand to make sure that the fillers do not move. There are also rules here. There is no need to make a big seam. If you do everything right, then the toshok will serve at least for 10 years. Each stage has its own features. For example, you need to evenly fill the kurak. This is quite difficult. If it's done incorrectly, then during the year, toshok will already be unsuitable for use. That's how we got another toshok. Here we used 17 types of kuraks, and each of them has its own meaning and name. One person will be able to sew it in 2-3 days at least. Since this is a difficult work, it takes a lot of time and patience. Therefore, you need to love it. Otherwise, sewing will not work. Here, our ethnic toshok is ready. When you meet this lovely girl, you will get amazed. When communicating with her, you are amazed at her crystal clear thoughts, lofty dreams and goals. She vigorously promotes the Kazakh national headdress Soraba to her peers and even managed to introduce it into fashion. Soraba is a headdress similar to a skullcap. The main difference is only that the soraba in the back and in the front has a fringe. There is a belief that such a headdress can protect the girl from a jinx. Soraba are divided into types of depending on the season. Summer, spring, and autumn. But in winter, it is replaced by a fur hat.
осы бас киім ішіндегі
Among headgear, this very skull cap reflects the peculiarities of girls.
бойжеткен қыздардың басты
Looking at the headdress, you could see that the little girl has grown up.
оның бойжеткен екенін осы тақия
Many believe that the skull cap as a headdress is for men only.
және де тақия
In fact, in the 15th, 17th century, this headdress was worn only by young women.
Ол 15-17 ғасыр аралығында қыз бала киген болатын. Көптеген тарихи кітаптарда Сораба жайлы аз мәліметтер берілген.
There is little information about Soraba in historical books. And yet, if you read the books of our scientists, Akishev, Margolan, in some places you can find information about it.
Жерлерде осы Сораба жайлы мәліметтер беріледі.
Soraba was worn from the age of 13 because this was the first start of a 12-year cycle. That is, from the age of 13 until marriage, they wore Soraba. After that, women wore Saukile and Kimishek. And also based on history, Soraba was more characteristic of the East Kazakhstan region. Our heroine Janar is also an Oriental beauty. Yes, she was born and raised on the land of Great Abai, where she absorbed the upbringing of grandmothers and their knowledge of Saukile and Kimishek. She grew up in a village where they are well aware of national traditions. From childhood, she loved art, creating a theater troupe of her puppets. Janar came up with characters by roles. It's probably no coincidence that she chose the profession of a costume designer.
Бірінші курстың аяғында көптеген тарихи
At the end of the first year in university, studying many historical books, I began to pay special attention to the Kazakh national headdresses. Among them was the skullcap. I wanted to revive the image of the girls in the skullcap and began to make it.
осы Сорабаны жасауға кірістім.
Skullcap is the favorite headdress of Kazakh girls. They were different depending on the patterns and tailoring. This type of headdress was made of brocade, cloth, or velvet.
Мен бұл бас киімде бархат және де осы
When I make headgear, I prefer to use velvet and cotton cloth, and I use felt as the basis.
ретінде киізді аламын. Сораба жасауда ең бастысы біз сол адам
To sew the soraba, the first thing to do is to take the measures of the head circumference of the customer. Then we transfer these dimensions to the fabric, cut and start sewing.
тіге бастаймыз. Екіншісі сол өлшемді алып
Secondly, we transfer these dimensions to the felt and sew the lining.
бар дайын болған
The finished parts of the product are connected to each other.
оны бір-біріне жалғаймыз.
First, we sew a lining on the felt, after which we wrap velvet fabric on top.
Бархаттан жасалған
At the very end, we attach a variety of fringe or jewelry to the finished soraba.
үстіне әртүрлі шашақтар, салпаншақтар жалғаймыз. Қазіргі таңда мен осы салпаншақтарға қазақтың оюларын, теңгелері сияқты
Today, instead of hanging jewelry, I use different fittings.
жасап отырмын. Алайда болашақта
Kazakh ornaments, coins. In the future, I want to use images from Kazakh mythology instead of simple jewelry.
мифологиясын алып жасасақ та, сол бір салпаншақта бейнеленіп тұрсын деген ойда.
In Kazakh customs, a headdress is considered a noble attribute that represents beauty and style. In the folklore, there is a saying, a friend looks at a shoe, an enemy looks at a headdress. The headdress of Kazakh women was distinguished by their age and marital status.
Адам баласы негізінен ерте кезеңнен бастап бас киімге аса қатты мән береді, ерекше көңіл бөліп, оны құрметтейді. Осы әйелдердің бас киімі
From ancient times, people paid special attention to the headdresses. It was very appreciated.
қана қоймай, оның киелі мағынасы да бар. Мысалы,
Women's headdresses performed not only the function of beauty and grace, they had a sacral meaning.
сол тақияны алып қарасақ, тақия бас киімі формасы
For example, if you take a skull cap, its shape is round, the top is domed. It looks like a bowl.
және де оның киелі мағынасы
This meant that the girl who came to this world has protection, and her soul is filled with good. The Creator will give her a full cup of well-being.
өзінің тәңірісі қорғау ретінде осындай тостаған ретінде барлық игілікті толтырып береді деген киелі мағынасы бар.
Shanar said that she does not get tired of studying philosophy and history of the Sorabs. She's inspired by love for the culture of her people, but we were somewhat surprised by her choice of colors.
Менің топтамамда көптеген түстер жоқ, оның ең бастысы 3 түсін таңдап алдым.
In general, many colors are missing from my collection. I have chosen 3 main ones. Do you know why? I'm inspired by the Kazakh steppes. For example, if you paid attention, Skullcaps are like yellow, blue, and green.
Ол осы біздің қазақтың кен байтақ.
These are the herbs of our endless steppe, blue sky and flat steppe. That's why I chose these colors on purpose.
Сол себептен осы 3 түсті арнайы таңдап алдым.
These 3 colors will never be out of fashion. Soraba is a headdress that is beyond the control of the passage of time, says the designer. Yes, Shanar, as in childhood, comes up with different images, combines several styles. But today's heroes are no longer dolls.
Менің ойымдағы тақиялы қыз ол нәзіктік пен еркіндік.
In my imagination, the girl in the Skullcap is a phenomena of tenderness and freedom.
Жан дүниесі тұтас. Әр түрлі киім үлгілеріне
She knows how to combine different styles of clothing. For example, a Skullcap can be combined with classical style, also with a grunge style, and with casual clothes.
киімдермен де үйлестіруге болады тақияны. Мысалы, оны бір пиджак.
Each person has his own taste. Therefore, the Skullcap is made in accordance with 3 styles. Also, it can be combined with a modern style.
және де әрбір тақия заманауи стильге өте жақсы үйлесімін тауып жатыр. Болашақта мен тек қана
In the future, in addition to making hats, I want to begin to harmonize Kazakh national clothes with a modern style.
заманауи стильге үйлестіргім келеді.
So to speak, modernize, so that this clothes can be worn anytime and anywhere.
Киілетіндей қылып жасағым келеді.
Thread painting is an original technique for creating incredibly beautiful paintings with multicolored threads. As a type of fine art, thread painting appeared in Mexico and then became widespread around the world. Paintings made in this technique are bright and colorful. Baljan Baltasheva will tell us about how they're made.
Ниткографией я занялась в первый раз.
I started to make thread painting 4 years ago. I was looking for different techniques to create paintings.
У меня была идея.
I had the idea to paint a picture of Kyrgyzstan,
Я не знала, какими способами это изобразить.
but I did not know in what ways to draw it. I didn't want to use oil colors or pencil. I wanted to use something unusual. For some reason, I searched on the internet for thread technique, and then I found a thread painting. The first painting I made as I wanted was Kyrgyzstan, which I did not plan to sell. I just posted on social networks, and people began to write to me with requests to sell the painting. It was mostly foreigners. And so it happened that the first 7 paintings were one composition where the girl was pouring tea. Before you start creating a thread work, you need to prepare the necessary materials.
Для того, чтобы выполнить картину в технике ниткография,
In order to make a picture using the thread technique, we need a board, any canvas, maybe cardboard. I have now chosen such a wooden board. Threads, it can be yarn, it can be thin threads, and floss.
это тоже может быть и пряжа, это может быть тонкие нитки муляные.
I also took a very long time to select and chose the most suitable for me.
И клей.
Regular fabric glue, I choose the size of the canvas depending on the idea of my drawing. For example, there will be a couple here, which I often have in my paintings. A couple in the mountains of Almaty, in nature by the lake. I come up with a composition and make it.
Придумываю композицию, и все, и выполняю.
Having prepared the materials, the artist starts to work. A drawing is applied on the base with a pencil. It's worth noting that such a simple drawing turns into a stunning thread canvas.
После того, как вы нанесли рисунок,
After the painting is applied, I usually make a contour of the image.
делаю контур.
Having a glue and scissors, the artist glues the contour of the image with threads, tightly pressing them to the base. Clearly marked boundaries of the drawing must be covered with threads. After the contour dries, the internal parts are filled.
Как я наношу контур, жду, пока он...
How do I draw the contour? I wait for it to dry, or while it's drying, I start working somewhere else. Here, for example, everything is dried up, and it will be convenient to apply threads.
Здесь уже все подсохло. Здесь будет удобно наносить нитки.
A waterproof polymer adhesive is used here. The threads are usually glued in spiral order. The main thing is to fill the space inside the shape without omissions and emptiness. At the same time, if there are small parts in the painting, then the work begins with them. Thread painting is a rather painstaking work because it requires skill, patience, and accuracy to put threads close to each other without gaps.
Вот эта картина одна из моих последних. Здесь изображены Наташка.
This is one of the recent paintings. Here, an elderly couple near the yurt. I often use shanarak, piala, or kazu dishes. This painting is one of the 3 episodes. Here are the children, Kylin, and here are the old people. I showed 3 generations in one place and in the same style.
3 разных поколения, но в одном месте, в одном стиле.
Usually it takes 4 to 10 days to create one painting, depending on the size and number of elements. As in any other work, thread painting has its own secrets that help to work faster and more accurate. For example, if you use orgelit with a dense and smooth surface as a basis, it's easy to remove the threads from it and to repair them.
После того, как я закончу,
After I finish the picture, I definitely check whether the thread has unglued somewhere, and sometimes I smooth the picture. Some people like it when it has a relief, when you see the thickness of the threads, but I prefer a smooth surface.
более ровная, гладкая. Вот это самая знаменитая моя картина.
This is my most famous painting, Kid and Shy. It's the only one that has a name. I didn't give names to the rest. I made it in more than 30 different interpretations. Kylin in my paintings is depicted in the mountains, in the steppe, in yurts, and she is different in each painting. The finished work is made into a baguette, after which it takes a worthy place in the master's collection. Thread painting, like any creativity, should first of all bring pleasure and release of fantasy. While Baljan skillfully combines fantasy with elements of ethnicity, which gives her work a unique color.